Hi 5A and 5B, it's me. This is weird. I'm not fully into it. I miss you guys. It's kind of lame having to teach you from far away. But we're going to have to do the best we can and, struggle forth. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to read to you the excerpt from Rhyme and Reason from 1984. I'm going to put it into two parts just because that's easier with YouTube. Before I start reading, I want to talk to you about the general plan for English for the next few weeks. Of course, I don't really know exactly what's going to happen when you're going to go back to school. Officially, of course, it's the 6th of April, but we'll see. What's going to happen with your PTRs, all that stuff. I can't answer those questions. But the general plan from my end here, at least, is to post videos of me reading the 1984 excerpt and the Brave New World excerpt, which will be on your tests. And I expect you to listen to those videos and read along, just like you would in class. I also would like to encourage you, because you're stuck at home, many of you not going out, you can't, it's not like you can go out and party or anything, so I encourage you to use this time to get your books read, so, you can, I know the libraries are closed, but you can go on book.com, you can go and buy your books. Most books are not that expensive, especially the classics, so you can go on there, buy your books, get your books read in this time. Another thing you could do is go on Netflix or wherever you find your movies and your TV shows, and maybe watch some dystopian movies and TV shows, just to get you some more sort of comparisons. Like we watched The Matrix, that's on Netflix, but there's 3 others. A lot of you have already seen Divergent, and if you haven't, I recommend it. The Hunger Games is also on there. The Hunger Games is very, very good. And another one is called Annihilation. I don't know what it's probably going to flip it around so you can't read it. I don't know. Yeah, you can't read it. Annihilation is spelled Annihilation. It's got Natalie Portman in it. It's really scary dystopian stuff. It's scarier than The Matrix. So if you're not really into sort of super scary movies, I would maybe avoid Annihilation, but I fully recommend that you watch it. So those are 3 movies you could watch because you've got extra time on your hands at home. So it's just an idea that I had. We're on page 180. I started reading this with 5B and I haven't started it with 5A, so I'm just going to go straight from the top. And because, some of the 5B kids weren't even there on that day, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to start from the top and sort of assume that you don't know what I'm talking about. When I'm talking through this stuff, we've already gone through the bulk of the PowerPoint, and I haven't gotten to talk to you about everything on the PowerPoint, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. I've sort of got, full sentences on there, and you can sort of go through it yourselves. But have a look at what I've said about 1984 on the PowerPoint after you read this, and the same with the Brave New World reading as well. Okay, so unusually for Rhyme and Reason, this excerpt is from towards the end of 1984, so towards the end of the novel. So we have, in 1984, 3 main characters. We've got Winston Smith, who I told you is the protagonist. He's the main character. He's the character who we're supposed to identify with. He's in his late 30s, I think he's 37 or so, and he remembers a time before this dystopian state, very vaguely from his childhood. And he's supposed to represent us and our values as readers, so sort of modern Western ideas. So that's Winston Smith. He has a love affair, a romantic affair with Julia, a younger woman who can't remember the time before this dystopian state, and the other is O'Brien. Now, O'Brien is the 3rd main character. He is initially Winston thinks that he is secretly not loyal to Big Brother, not loyal to the party. He's a member of what's called the inner party, so he, unlike Winston Smith and Julia, gets like lots of nice perks, really nice house, wine, all the good stuff. But for some reason, Winston has this feeling that this guy is actually, a good guy, that he's actually on the side of the rebellion. So Winston sort of reaches out to him, believing that he's a sort of what's called the Brotherhood. Now, the Brotherhood is a legendary underground movement in Oceania where Winston lives that is supposedly fighting against Big Brother and trying to rebel against the party. But Winston's rebellion ends in complete failure. He never really got to achieve anything. He bought a nice journal to write in. You're not allowed to write in the party. He had a love affair that wasn't sanctioned by the party. You're not allowed to do that in 1984 either. So he has some personal rebellions, but he never did anything beyond these things. He and Julia get arrested. He gets imprisoned in the Ministry of Love, which is the place where everybody gets tortured. And he learns that O'Brien was actually never working with the Brotherhood, who was actually a bad guy the whole time, perhaps somewhat predictably. And Winston realizes that moment that the party always knew what he was up to, that there was never a moment where he had tricked them, or that they always knew that what he was thinking, that he was doing these things. They were always watching him. They were sort of letting him get away with this stuff in the short term. So it's a shocking moment for him. He is accused of terrible crimes that he didn't commit. He's starved, he's tortured, he confesses to everything just to make the pain stop, and he really sort of submits his body and really so just I'll just confess I'll do whatever you say, I'll confess to everything, just don't keep torturing me. And this is where we learn in 1984 that this is a dystopian state that's not content just with controlling the physical self of its residents, of the citizens, but it wants to control what's happening inside your head. So obedience is not enough. The party wants your love and wants control of your heart and mind. So it's a lot more, it's very insidious. Okay, so we're on page 180. Winston has been arrested, essentially. He's in a room with O'Brien. He's being tortured, and these are the moments where O'Brien really tries to break him. He's trying to make Winston fall in love with Big Brother, and not keep a free space in his mind, but actually really completely submit his opinions to Big Brother, and that Winston has no freedom of thought at all. Okay, so we're going to go from the top. Okay, so we're on page 180 of Rhyme and Reason, and I'm going to read from there. Okay, George Orwell from 1984. He was lying on something that felt like a camp bed, except that it was higher off the ground, and he was fixed down in some way so that he could not move. Light that seemed stronger than usual was falling on his face. O'Brien was standing at his side, looking down at him intently. At the other side of him stood a man in a white coat, holding a hypodermic syringe. He was starting up from the plank bed in the half-certainty that he had heard O'Brien's voice. All through this interrogation, although he had never seen him, he had had the feeling that O'Brien was at his elbow, just out of sight. It was O'Brien who was directing everything. It was he who set the guards onto Winston, and who prevented them from killing him. It was he who decided when Winston should scream with pain, when he should have a respite, when he should be fed, when he should sleep, when the drugs should be pumped into his arm. It was he who asked the questions and suggested the answers. He was the tormentor, he was the protector, he was the friend. Really interesting concept here in the idea that he starts to have very strong, loving feelings for O'Brien, and it's almost like a kind of what's it called when you fall in love with you're a hostage and you fall Stockholm syndrome. It's almost like a kind of Stockholm syndrome or something, that sort of, or when people are in abusive relationships and they can't leave their partner, that sort of psychology around that loving he or she who causes you pain, and those very weird, deep psychological things. So O'Brien has complete control over when Winston feels pain and when he is free from pain, and this creates very complex feelings in Winston for O'Brien. You'll see here that we have, and I've mentioned this to you before, in 1984, there's a control of the body and a control of the mind, and the party wants both. And it gains control of the body through pain, through imprisonment, through constant surveillance. And it gains control of the mind, again, through pain, through taking away that pain, and through the brainwashing that comes with that. So you have these two things working simultaneously in Winston in this prison cell. He did not remember any ending to his interrogation. There was a period of blackness, and then the cell or room in which he now was had gradually materialized around him. He was almost flat on his back and unable to move. O'Brien was looking down at him gravely and rather sadly. Under his hand there was a dial with a lever on top and figures running around the face. Now, we talked a little bit about this with 5B. It was sort of difficult for them to imagine exactly what he's holding there. A lever is like a sort of like a handle that you can pull to make things, to turn a machine on, to turn a machine up, to make it go faster or slower. A dial is the thing that measures, like numbers. So essentially, what O'Brien is doing is he's holding sort of the handle to a machine that can feed pain, that can give pain to Winston. So Winston's sort of bodily attached to this machine, and whenever O'Brien moves his hand and raises the lever, he can give him increasing amounts of pain, doses of pain. So that's what's happening. Without any warning, except a slight movement of O'Brien's hand, a wave of pain flooded his body. It was a frightening pain because he could not see what was happening. He had the feeling that his body was being wrenched out of shape. The joints were being slowly torn apart. Although the pain brought out the sweat on his forehead, the worst of all was the fear that his backbone was about to snap. "You are afraid," said O'Brien, watching his face. "Then in another moment something is going to break. Your special fear is that it is your backbone." "That is what you were thinking, is it not, Winston?" Winston did not answer. O'Brien drew back the lever on the dial. The wave of pain receded almost as quickly as it had come. "That was 40, said O'Brien. "You can see that the numbers on this dial run up to 100. Will you please remember, throughout our conversation, that I have it in my power to inflict pain on you at any moment, and to whatever degree I choose. If you tell me any lies, or even fall below your usual level of intelligence, you will cry out with pain instantly. Do you understand that?" O'Brien here says that if Winston lies to him, and O'Brien believes he will know that immediately, or even if he says something that's less intelligent than what he would usually say, he will get tortured. "Yes," said Winston. O'Brien's manner became less severe. He resettled his spectacles thoughtfully, and took a pace or two up and down. When he spoke, his voice was gentle and patient. "I am taking trouble with you, Winston," he said, "because you are worth trouble. You know perfectly well what is the matter with you. You have known it for years, though you have fought against the knowledge. You are mentally deranged. You suffer from a defective memory. You are unable to remember real events, and you persuade yourself that you remember other events which never happened. Even now I am well aware you are clinging to your disease under the impression that it is a virtue. Now we will take an example. There is a slogan dealing with the control of the past. Repeat it, if you please. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Okay, this line is an important line in the book because it's a slogan from the party, and it refers to this party obsession with controlling history and memory. So the party wants to has a technique of using false history to break down the minds of its people, that psychological independence that they have. They rewrite history to control that. So by controlling the story that we tell ourselves of the past ensures control of the future, because the past can be treated essentially as a set of conditions that justify or encourage future goals. If the past was idyllic, then people will act to recreate it. If the past was nightmarish, then people will act to prevent such circumstances from reoccurring. So the party creates a past that was a time of misery and slavery, and then claims to have been the ones to save humanity from that misery, and then And by doing that, then they sort of make people invested in keeping the party around. Without us, what will happen? And you read Animal Farm 2 years ago, you might remember that whenever the animals complain to the pigs about the increasing power that the pigs have, the pigs will always say, Napoleon or Squealer would always said to the animals, oh, you don't want Mr. Jones to come back, do you? So the pigs always use the threat that Mr. Jones will come back to sort of maintain their power, and the party's doing exactly the same thing. So, by controlling the past, you control the future. And to control the past, you need to control the present. So it's a little bit of a sort of a twisty wheel, but it's quite a simple idea. If you want to control the past, you need to be in control of the present, because you can rewrite history from there. So every history book reflects party ideology. Individuals are forbidden from keeping memories of their own past. So in 1984, you can't have documents. You can't have that journal. That's why Winston isn't allowed to have a journal and write in it, because if something happens and he says, oh, Oceania is at war with country A, and then the party decides to change it and say we've always been at war with country B, well then that document would exist as evidence against how they've rewritten history. So that's why for Orwell, in both 1984 and Animal Farm, literacy and education is so important, because then we can read our own books, write our own books, keep records of things, because the human mind is fallible, right? But if we have a way of recording our own version of our own lives, it becomes very difficult for other people to take control of that. So that's why literacy and education is so important. So because you can't keep photographs, because you can't keep any kind of documentation of your own life or of the history of your country, of your people have to rely on their own very short, fuzzy memories and become very willing to just believe whatever they're told, essentially. So beyond that is an idea also in this that people, if you have control of what's happening inside people's heads, then nothing else really matters. So the past has no concrete existence as such. The only concrete existence it might have is in sort of books or videos or photography. We don't have that. Once a moment has passed, it's impossible to recreate that in a concrete way, and so it's only real in the mind of human beings. And when you can control those minds, then you can control the past. And if you can control the past, then you can control the future. And if you can control the future, then you'll be in control forever, which is the aim of the party. Fun stuff. Okay. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Winston repeated obediently. Who controls the present controls the past, said O'Brien, nodding his head with slow approval. Is it your opinion, Winston, that the past has real existence? A feeling of helplessness descended upon Winston. His eyes flitted towards the dial. He not only did not know whether yes or no was the answer that could save him from pain, he did not even know which answer he believed to be the true one. O'Brien smiled faintly. I will put it more precisely. Does the past exist concretely in space? Is there somewhere or other a place, a world of solid objects where the past is still happening? No. Then where does the past exist, if at all? In records. It is written down. In records and in the mind, in human memories. In memory. Very well then. We, the party, control all the records, and we control all memories. Then we control the past, do we not? But how can you stop people remembering things? Cried Winston again, momentarily forgetting the dial. It is involuntary. It is outside oneself. How can you control memory? You have not controlled mine. That's the very reason why Winston is in this room. He's submitted himself, he's confessed, he's been tortured, he'll do whatever they say, but at the moment he's unwilling to give up this space in his head that he's free to remember what he believes, what he sees as the true version of his own life and his events. And it's that O'Brien wants to take over. He wants control not only of Winston's physical self, he wants control of Winston's mind. O'Brien's manner grew stern again. He laid his hand on the dial. On the contrary, he said, you have not controlled it. That is what brought you here. You are here because you have failed in humility, in self-discipline. Only the disciplined mind can see reality, Winston. You believe that reality is something objective, external, existing in its own right. When you delude yourself into thinking that you see something, you assume that everybody sees the same thing as you. But I tell you, Winston, that reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. Not in the individual mind, which can make mistakes, and in any case soon perishes. Only in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. Whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. It is impossible to see reality except by looking through the eyes of the party. That is the fact you have got to relearn, Winston. He paused for a few moments, as though to allow what he had been saying to sink in. Do you remember, he went on, writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 makes 4? Yes, said Winston. O'Brien held up his left hand, its back towards Winston, with the thumb hidden and 4 fingers extended. How many fingers am I holding up, Winston? 4. And if the party says it is not 4 but 5, then how many? 4. The word ended in a gasp of pain. The needle of the dial had shot up to 55. The sweat had sprung out all over Winston's body. The air tore into his lungs and issued again in deep groans, which even by clenching his teeth he could not stop. O'Brien watched him, the 4 fingers still extended. He drew back the lever. This time the pain was only slightly eased. How many fingers, Winston? 4. Okay, I'm going to stop here, because this is going to be part 1 of 2, and I'm going to start recording again in a second.